A wrong number text at 2 a.m. brings billionaire Dominic Westbrook to Michaela Reese's doorstep with groceries in hand. But as kindness turns to connection, secrets threaten their fragile bond. Who is Dominic really? And can love bridge two very different worlds? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Michaela Reese dragged herself up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, each step a reminder of the 12-hour shift she'd just finished at Lola's diner. At 27, she shouldn't feel this tired, but between her 2 jobs and taking care of Grandpa Joe, sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, fishing her keys from her purse. The hallway light flickered, threatening to go out completely. She'd have to talk to the building manager again, though she knew it wouldn't do any good. Not in this part of Atlanta. Inside the small apartment, the TV was playing an old western. Her grandfather sat in his worn recliner, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Grandpa, I'm home," Michaela called, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. Joseph Reese turned, his weathered face lighting up with a smile. "There's my girl. How was work today?" "Same as always. Mrs. Henderson complained about her eggs being too runny, and Mr. Wilson left me a $5 tip on a $50 check." She kicked off her shoes, wincing as her swollen feet touched the cool floor. Her grandfather's smile faded. "You working too hard, baby girl?" "I'm fine, Grandpa. Just tired." She opened the refrigerator and frowned. It was nearly empty except for some milk, a stick of butter, and leftover meatloaf from 2 nights ago. "I need to go grocery shopping." "Don't you worry about that now. Get some rest." Michaela shook her head. "We need food for tomorrow, and you're out of your special bread." Her grandfather's arthritis medicine worked better when he ate it with the honey wheat bread from Jackson's Bakery across town. It was one of the few comforts he allowed himself. "I can make a list and ask Tanya to pick up a few things on her way over tomorrow," Michaela said, referring to her cousin who sometimes helped with Grandpa Joe. She grabbed her phone and started typing a text. "Need eggs, ginger tea, the one with lemon, canned peaches and honey wheat bread from Jackson's. Will pay you back. Thanks." She hit send and sighed, too tired to notice she'd selected the wrong contact in her phone. "I'm going to take a shower and get some sleep, Grandpa. You need anything before I go?" "I'm just fine, baby girl. You get your rest." Michaela kissed her grandfather's forehead and shuffled to the bathroom, every muscle in her body aching for relief. Across town, in a sleek high-rise overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Dominic Westbrook sat alone in his office. The clock on the wall showed it was past midnight, but time had little meaning to him these days. As CEO of Westbrook Holdings, one of the largest private firms in Georgia, his days blended together in a parade of meetings, acquisitions, and decisions that affected thousands of employees. At 31, Dominic had achieved what most men spent lifetimes chasing. His company was valued at over $3 billion. He owned properties in 4 countries. His face had appeared on the cover of Fortune magazine twice in the past year. And yet, sitting in his corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, he felt nothing but emptiness. His phone vibrated on his desk, pulling him from his thoughts. An unknown number had sent him a text, probably a wrong number, but he opened it anyway. "Need eggs, ginger tea, the one with lemon, canned peaches and honey wheat bread from Jackson's. Will pay you back. Thanks." Dominic stared at the message, a small smile tugging at his lips. It was indeed a wrong number, but something about the simple request stirred something inside him. When was the last time anyone had asked him for something so ordinary, something that wasn't a business favor or a donation to a charity gala? Without giving himself time to reconsider, he typed back, "I think you have the wrong number, but I can pick these things up for you." He waited, but no response came. The person had probably realized their mistake and was too embarrassed to reply. He should forget about it and get back to the quarterly reports waiting for his review. Instead, he found himself grabbing his coat. Michaela woke with a start, disoriented by the darkness in her room. A glance at her phone told her it was just after 2 a.m. What had woken her? Then she heard it again, a soft knock at the apartment door. Her heart raced. No one knocked at this hour unless something was wrong. Had something happened to Tanya? Or was it Mrs. Peterson from across the hall needing help with her oxygen tank again? She slipped on her robe and hurried to the door, careful not to wake her grandfather. "Who is it?" she called softly, peering through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, tall, well-dressed in a dark coat, his face partially obscured as he looked down at something in his arms. He was a stranger, definitely not someone from the building. "I have a delivery," the man said, his voice deep but gentle. Michaela frowned. "At 2 in the morning? Who are you?" You texted about needing some groceries. I think you sent it to the wrong number, but I figured someone needed them. I hope I got the right brand of tea." Michaela's hand flew to her mouth. She had sent the text to the wrong person. But instead of ignoring it, this stranger had gone shopping and brought everything to her door, in the middle of the night. Cautiously, she opened the door, keeping the chain lock in place. The man looked up and Michaela's breath caught. He was handsome, not in the flashy way of the guys who sometimes left their numbers on napkins at the diner, but in a quiet, intense way. His dark eyes held a warmth that seemed at odds with his expensive-looking clothes. "I don't understand," she said. "How did you know where I live?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Your area code is local, and you mentioned Jackson's Bakery. There are only a few apartment buildings within a reasonable distance of there. I tried 2 others before this one. I asked for a Michaela. I saw that was your name in my contacts list when the text came through. You went to 3 different buildings looking for me? To deliver groceries?" He nodded, looking slightly embarrassed now. "It sounds strange when you put it that way. I can leave these here if you'd prefer." Michaela hesitated. Every warning bell in her head told her to send this man away, no matter how good-looking or seemingly kind he was. But there was something in his eyes, a loneliness that matched her own. She closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it fully. "I'm sorry, I don't even know your name." "Dominic," he said simply, offering no last name. "I'm Michaela Reese, but I guess you already knew that." She gestured to the grocery bags in his arms. "I can't accept these. I don't have the money to pay you back right now." "I don't want your money," Dominic said quickly. "Please take them. They'll just go to waste otherwise." Before she could protest further, a voice called from inside the apartment. "Michaela? Who's at the door, baby girl?" "It's nothing, Grandpa. Go back to sleep," she called over her shoulder. But Joseph Reese appeared behind her, his pajamas rumpled and his grey hair sticking up at odd angles. "We got company at this hour." Dominic straightened his shoulders slightly. "Good evening, sir. I'm Dominic. I was just dropping off some groceries." Grandpa Joe's eyebrows shot up. "Groceries? At 2 in the morning?" "It's a long story, Grandpa," Michaela said, feeling the situation growing more awkward by the second. To her surprise, her grandfather smiled. "Well, any man bringing food instead of trouble is welcome in my book. Come on in, young man. Let's get those bags to the kitchen." "Grandpa," Michaela protested, but the old man was already shuffling back inside, clearly expecting Dominic to follow. Dominic looked at her questioningly. "I can just leave these," Michaela sighed. "You might as well come in. Once Grandpa Joe gets an idea in his head, there's no changing his mind." She led Dominic to the small kitchen, acutely aware of the contrast between his tailored coat and the chipped laminate countertops of their apartment. He set the bags down carefully and began unpacking them. "Eggs, ginger tea with lemon, canned peaches, and honey wheat bread from Jackson's," he said, placing each item on the counter. "I hope this is what you needed." Michaela stared at the items in disbelief. "You got everything, even the right tea." "I wasn't sure about the peaches. They had different brands, so I got a couple." Sure enough, he'd purchased 3 different brands of canned peaches. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate. "But I still don't understand why you would do this." Dominic looked down at his hands, as if the answer might be written there. "Honestly, I'm not sure myself. I wanted to help." Grandpa Joe chuckled from the doorway. "Sometimes the good Lord puts it in our hearts to help strangers, son. No need to question it." He looked at the bread on the counter and smiled. "And that's my favorite bread, too. Got the seeds on top just the way I like it." Dominic smiled, seeming more at ease with the old man than he had with Michaela. "I'm glad I could help, sir." "Joseph Reese," her grandfather said, extending his hand. "But everyone calls me Grandpa Joe." Dominic shook his hand firmly. "It's nice to meet you, Grandpa Joe." "You work nights?" the old man asked, eyeing Dominic's formal attire. "Sometimes," Dominic answered vaguely. "I keep unusual hours." Michaela found her voice again. "Well, we appreciate the delivery, but it's late, and I'm sure you need to get home." Dominic nodded, taking the hint. "Of course, I should go." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I hope you don't mind, but I saved your number in my phone, just in case you need anything else." Before Michaela could respond, her grandfather spoke up. "That's mighty kind of you, Dominic. You never know when we might need a good neighbor." Dominic smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. "Good night, Grandpa Joe. Good night, Michaela." As soon as the door closed behind him, Michaela turned to her grandfather. "Grandpa, we don't know anything about that man. I know he brought food instead of asking for it. I know he called me sir and looked me in the eye when he shook my hand. And I know he didn't want anything in return. The old man's eyes twinkled. That tells me plenty. Michaela shook her head but couldn't help smiling. You're impossible, and you're too suspicious, baby girl. Not everyone in this world is out to take advantage. As Michaela put away the groceries, she found herself wondering about Dominic. Who was this man who would go to such lengths for a stranger? And why did she feel so drawn to him after just one meeting? The next morning, Michaela was buttering a slice of the honey wheat bread when her phone chimed with a text message. Did the tea help? It always helps me sleep. Dominic. She stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Part of her, the cautious part that had been hurt before, said to ignore it, but another part, the part that had been touched by his kindness, won out. Yes, it did. Thank you again for the groceries. I'll pay you back when I get my next paycheck. His response came quickly. No need. Consider it my good deed for the month. How is Grandpa Joe this morning? She smiled despite herself. His arthritis is acting up, but the bread helps. He takes his medicine with it. I'm glad. Would it be okay if I checked in on you both sometime? No pressure. Michaela hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She should say no. She had enough complications in her life without adding a mysterious Good Samaritan to the mix. But before she could reply, Grandpa Joe called from the living room. Is that your grocery man texting you? How did you know? She asked, walking into the room. The way you're smiling at that phone. Tell him he's welcome to come by for dinner sometime. A man who knows the value of good bread deserves a home-cooked meal. Michaela laughed. Grandpa, we don't even know him. Then it's time we did. The old man's eyes turned serious. Life's too short to turn away kindness, baby girl. You of all people should know that. Thinking of her parents, both gone too soon, Michaela nodded slowly. She turned back to her phone and typed, Grandpa Joe says you're welcome to come for dinner sometime. If you want to. The reply was almost immediate. I'd like that very much, thank you. As Michaela got ready for her shift at the bookstore, her second job, she found herself smiling. For the first time in a long while, she was looking forward to something beyond work and responsibilities. Dominic sat in his car outside Michaela's apartment building, staring at her last text message. A dinner invitation, something so simple, yet it had made his heart race like he was closing a billion-dollar deal. He'd been raised in a world of calculated moves and strategic relationships. Every dinner, every conversation had an agenda, but there was no agenda here. Just a kind old man and his granddaughter offering thanks for a simple act of kindness. What would they think if they knew who he really was? Would their gratitude turn to expectation? Would Michaela's warm eyes turn calculating, like so many others had? Dominic started his car, his decision made. For now, he would just be Dominic, not Dominic Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Holdings, not the man whose net worth was tracked by financial magazines, just a man who had delivered groceries in the middle of the night because, for once, he wanted to do something that mattered to someone real. As he drove away, he didn't notice the black SUV that pulled out behind him, or the man inside taking photos of Michaela's building. His assistant, Marcus, had been concerned when Dominic had disappeared from his penthouse in the middle of the night. Tracking his boss's phone had led him here to this run-down apartment building in a part of Atlanta that Dominic Westbrook had no business visiting. Marcus took one final photo and sent it to the head of security. Mr. Westbrook was too important, too valuable to the company, to be wandering around dangerous neighborhoods alone. They would need to find out who lived in that building and what connection they had to their boss. Inside her apartment, Michaela hummed as she helped her grandfather with his morning exercises, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined, all because of a wrong number and a late-night grocery delivery. A week later, Michaela and Dominic had settled into a strange but comfortable routine. He texted her each morning, asking about her day and how Grandpa Joe was feeling. She found herself looking forward to these messages, to sharing small details of her life with someone who seemed genuinely interested. Dominic had come for dinner twice. The first time he'd arrived with more groceries, not just necessities but small luxuries like fresh berries and good coffee. The second time, he'd brought a checker set for Grandpa Joe, who had mentioned loving the game in his youth. Each time Michaela had studied him, looking for signs of an ulterior motive, but she found none. He dressed simply now, in jeans and button-down shirts, though she could tell from the fabric that they were expensive. He never mentioned his job beyond saying he worked in finance, and he seemed more interested in hearing Grandpa Joe's stories than in talking about himself. There was a sadness in him, a loneliness that matched her own. She recognized it because she'd carried the same weight since losing her parents, the feeling of being untethered in the world. responsible for everything, but belonging nowhere. On Friday evening, Michaela was rushing to finish her shift at the bookstore when her phone rang. It was Mrs. Peterson, their neighbor. "Michaela, honey, it's your grandpa. He's having one of his bad spells. I'm with him now, but he's asking for you." Michaela's heart raced. "I'll be right there. Did you call an ambulance?" "He won't let me. Says it's just his chest acting up again and he doesn't want the expense. You know how stubborn he is. Keep him calm. I'm on my way." Michaela hung up and turned to her manager. "Family emergency. I have to go." Without waiting for a response, she grabbed her purse and ran for the door. Outside, she realized with dismay that it was pouring rain and the next bus wouldn't come for 20 minutes. She'd have to call a taxi, though she could hardly afford it. As she fumbled with her phone, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Dominic's concerned face. "Michaela, what's wrong?" "Dominic, what are you doing here?" She was soaking wet already, rain plastering her hair to her face. "I was going to surprise you with coffee after your shift. You mentioned you worked at the bookstore on Fridays." Any other time she might have been touched by the gesture. Now she was just desperate. "It's Grandpa Joe. He's having chest pains. I need to get home right away." "Get in," Dominic said, his voice turning serious. "I'll take you." Without hesitation, Michaela climbed into the passenger seat. The interior of the car was warm and smelled of leather. Under different circumstances, she might have commented on the luxury vehicle, so at odds with Dominic's understated appearance. But all she could think about was her grandfather. "Thank you," she said as Dominic pulled away from the curb, driving faster than the rain-slicked streets warranted. "I don't know what I would have done." "Don't thank me," he said, his eyes fixed on the road. "Just tell me where to go." As they sped through the rain-soaked streets, Michaela prayed that they wouldn't be too late, and that this mysterious man beside her was truly the blessing he appeared to be. The emergency room buzzed with activity, as nurses rushed between curtained areas and worried families huddled in plastic chairs. Michaela sat beside her grandfather's bed, holding his weathered hand, while a doctor reviewed his chart. "The good news, Mr. Reese, is that you didn't have a heart attack," the doctor said, looking up from his clipboard. "But your blood pressure is dangerously high, and there's some irregularity in your heartbeat that concerns me." Grandpa Joe waved his free hand dismissively. "Been living with a bad ticker for years, Doc. Nothing new there." The doctor frowned. "This isn't something to take lightly, sir. I'd like to keep you overnight for observation and run some additional tests in the morning." Michaela squeezed her grandfather's hand. "Please, Grandpa, just one night." The old man sighed. "How much is all this gonna cost? We ain't got insurance for extra tests." "We'll figure it out," Michaela said, though she had no idea how. Her last paycheck had already gone toward rent, and the next one wouldn't arrive for a week. "Your health is what matters." "I'll be right back," the doctor said, sensing the family needed a moment alone. "The nurse will be in to get you settled for the night." As soon as the doctor left, Grandpa Joe shook his head. "We can't afford this, baby girl. You know that. Don't worry about the money right now." Michaela fought to keep her voice steady. "We'll find a way." A soft knock interrupted them. Dominic stood in the doorway, his clothes still damp from the rain. He'd insisted on driving them to the hospital, but had stayed in the waiting room to give them privacy. "How are you feeling, Grandpa Joe?" he asked, his voice gentle. The old man managed a weak smile. "Been better, son, but I've been worse too." Dominic stepped into the room, his eyes meeting Michaela's. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Before she could answer, a nurse appeared with admission paperwork. "I need the patient's insurance information and a credit card for the copay," she said briskly. Michaela's stomach tightened. "We don't have insurance. How much will it cost for one night?" The nurse's expression softened slightly. "For the ER visit alone, you're looking at about $1,500. With the overnight stay and tests tomorrow," she hesitated, "it could be several thousand." Michaela felt the room spin. She had less than $200 in her checking account. "I'll take care of it," Dominic said quietly. "What?" Michaela turned to him stunned. "I'll cover the hospital expenses." He pulled out his wallet and handed the nurse a credit card. "Please make sure Mr. Reese gets whatever care he needs." The nurse looked between them, confused, but took the card. "I'll process this right away." As soon as she left, Michaela pulled Dominic into the hallway. "What are you doing? That could be thousands of dollars." Dominic's expression remained calm. "I have the money, Michaela. Please let me help. We barely know you. Why would you do this?" His dark eyes held hers steadily. "Because I can, and because—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Because you and Grandpa Joe matter to me." Michaela shook her head, emotions warring inside her. Gratitude fought with pride, and suspicion battled with the growing feelings she had for this mysterious man. "I can't let you do this. We'll find another way. There is no other way right now, and you know it." His voice was gentle but firm. "Think of your grandfather. He needs to be here tonight." Tears filled her eyes. "I'll pay you back, every penny. We can talk about that later." Dominic placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "For now, just focus on Grandpa Joe." Michaela nodded, too exhausted to argue further. They returned to the room where Grandpa Joe was watching them with knowing eyes. "You two sort things out?" he asked. "Everything's taken care of," Dominic said before Michaela could respond. "You just rest and let the doctors do their job." The old man studied Dominic's face for a long moment, then nodded. "You're a good man, Dominic. Reminds me of my Matthew. God rest his soul." Michaela felt a pang at the mention of her father. "Grandpa." "It's true, baby girl. Your daddy would approve." He patted the edge of the bed. "Both of you sit down now. No sense standing around looking worried. I ain't dead yet." Despite everything, Michaela smiled. Her grandfather's spirit remained unbroken, even in a hospital bed. As the evening wore on, nurses came and went, checking vitals and administering medication. Dominic never left, quietly bringing coffee for Michaela and making sure Grandpa Joe had everything he needed. When visiting hours ended, he insisted on driving Michaela home. "You need to rest," he said as they walked to his car. "I'll pick you up in the morning and bring you back." Too drained to argue, Michaela simply nodded. The events of the day had left her emotionally spent. As they drove through the quiet streets, she finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why were you at the bookstore tonight? How did you know my schedule?" Dominic kept his eyes on the road. "You mentioned yesterday that you were working the closing shift. I thought you might like some company on your way home." He glanced at her briefly. "I should have called first. I wasn't trying to surprise you in a creepy way." Despite everything, Michaela found herself smiling. "It wasn't creepy, it was nice." She paused. "And it was lucky for us that you were there. I'm glad I could help," he said simply. When they arrived at her building, Dominic insisted on walking her to her door. Standing in the dimly lit hallway, Michaela suddenly felt awkward. What was the proper way to thank someone who had just paid thousands of dollars for your grandfather's medical care? "Thank you," she said finally. "Not just for tonight, but for everything since that text message. I don't know why you're doing all this, but I'm grateful." Dominic smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Sometimes people come into our lives for a reason, Michaela. I'm just glad I could be there when you needed someone." On impulse, she rose on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. "Good night, Dominic." His eyes widened slightly, but his smile deepened. "Good night, Michaela. I'll see you in the morning." Inside her empty apartment, Michaela leaned against the door, her emotions a tangled mess. Who was this man who had appeared in her life like some guardian angel? And why did she feel so drawn to him, despite all the unanswered questions? The next morning, true to his word, Dominic arrived to drive Michaela back to the hospital. To her surprise, he carried a small duffel bag. "I brought a change of clothes for Grandpa Joe," he explained when she questioned him, "and some of his favorite tea. I thought it might make him feel more comfortable." Michaela was touched by the thoughtfulness. "How did you know which clothes to bring?" "I called Mrs. Peterson this morning. Hope you don't mind. You mentioned she has a spare key for emergencies." "You thought of everything," Michaela said, shaking her head in wonder. Dominic shrugged. "I try to anticipate needs. It's part of my job." "Your job in finance," she said, studying his face. "You've never really told me what you do." A flicker of something, discomfort, crossed his features. "It's not very interesting. I manage investments for a company downtown." Before she could press for details, they arrived at the hospital. Grandpa Joe was sitting up in bed, looking better than he had the night before. His face brightened when he saw them. "There's my two favorite people. Come to spring me from this place?" The doctor arrived shortly after, bringing both good and bad news. Grandpa Joe's condition had stabilized, but he would need new medication, expensive medication, to keep his blood pressure under control. "With proper care and lifestyle changes, you can manage this condition, Mr. Reese," the doctor explained. "But it's crucial that you take these medications exactly as prescribed and come back for regular checkups." As the doctor wrote out prescriptions, Michaela felt the familiar weight of financial worry settling on her shoulders. Even with discount programs, the new medications would cost hundreds of dollars each month, money they simply didn't have. Once again, Dominic stepped in. "I'll take care of the prescriptions," he said quietly to Michaela, as they helped Grandpa Joe get dressed. "Dominic, no, you've done too much already. Please let me help." His eyes were earnest. "Just until you can figure out a more permanent solution." Michaela wanted to refuse, to maintain her independence and pride. But her grandfather's health came first. "Okay," she conceded, "but this is a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back." Dominic nodded, though something in his expression suggested he had no intention of accepting repayment. After settling Grandpa Joe back at home, Michaela found herself alone with Dominic in the kitchen. Mrs. Peterson had brought over a casserole, and Michaela was making tea to go with it. "I need to know more about you," she said suddenly, turning to face him. "You've become important to us, to me, but you're still such a mystery." Dominic leaned against the counter, his expression guarded. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Where you're from, your family, how you can afford to pay for hospital bills and expensive medications without blinking an eye." She took a step closer to him. "Who are you really, Dominic?" He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "I grew up in Boston," he finally said. "My parents died when I was in college, car accident. I don't have any siblings or close family." "I'm sorry," Michaela said softly. She knew the pain of losing parents all too well. "After they died, I threw myself into work, built a career, made money." His voice was neutral, as if reciting facts from someone else's life. "But I never really built a life outside of that. No real friends, no relationships that mattered." "Until you got a wrong number text asking for groceries," Michaela said with a small smile. Dominic's expression warmed. "Until then, yes. But that doesn't explain how you can afford all this. Managing investments must pay very well." A shadow crossed his face. "I've been fortunate financially, more than fortunate. But money doesn't mean much when you have no one to share it with." Before Michaela could respond, Grandpa Joe called from the living room, asking for his tea. The moment for deeper revelations passed, but Michaela felt they had crossed some threshold. Dominic had opened up, if only a little, and the connection between them had deepened. Over the next few weeks, Dominic became a fixture in their lives. He visited almost daily, bringing groceries, books, or simply his company. He played checkers with Grandpa Joe and helped Michaela organize the old man's medications. On weekends, he drove them to the park or to Grandpa Joe's doctor appointments. Michaela found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of his voice, to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. There was a gentleness to him that belied his sometimes formal demeanor, a kindness that showed in 100 small ways. One evening, after Grandpa Joe had gone to bed, they sat on the small balcony outside Michaela's apartment, sharing a bottle of wine Dominic had brought. "I've never told anyone this," Michaela said, looking out at the city lights, "but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning, working 2 jobs, taking care of Grandpa, trying to keep everything together. There are days when I don't know how I'll make it to the next." Dominic's hand found hers in the darkness. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Michaela. Most people would have crumbled under half the pressure you deal with every day." She turned to look at him, her heart racing at the warmth of his touch. "I don't feel strong. I feel scared most of the time." "That's what makes you brave," he said, his voice low. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." In the soft glow from the streetlights, his face was all planes and shadows, beautiful in its seriousness. Michaela felt herself drawn to him, not just physically but on some deeper level, as if her soul recognized something in his. "Dominic," she whispered, leaning closer. He met her halfway, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both gentle and urgent, as if he had been waiting for this moment as long as she had. His hand cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheek with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally pulled apart, Michaela saw something new in his eyes, not just desire but a vulnerability that matched her own. "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply, the words hanging in the night air between them. Michaela should have been scared by the declaration, by the speed with which this man had entered her life and claimed a place in her heart, but instead, she felt only a profound sense of rightness. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, "and it terrifies me." Dominic smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I still feel like there's so much I don't know about you, like you're holding part of yourself back." She held his gaze. "I want to know all of you, Dominic, the good and the bad." A shadow passed over his face. "There are things about my life that might change how you see me. I'm afraid of that." "Nothing could change how I feel," Michaela insisted. Not unless you're secretly a serial killer. She laughed, but when Dominic didn't join in, her smile faded. What is it? What are you afraid to tell me? He took a deep breath. My job. It's more than just managing investments. The shrill ring of his phone cut him off. Dominic glanced at the screen and frowned. I'm sorry, I have to take this. It's work. He stepped inside to take the call, leaving Michaela alone with her thoughts. Whatever secret he was keeping, she was certain it couldn't be as bad as he feared. In the weeks she had known him, Dominic had shown himself to be kind, generous, and trustworthy. What could possibly change that? When he returned, his expression was troubled. I'm sorry, but I have to go. There's an emergency at work. At this hour, Michaela checked her watch. It was nearly midnight. Financial markets don't sleep, he said with a tight smile, especially when you're dealing with international clients. She walked him to the door, disappointed that their moment of truth had been interrupted. At the threshold, he pulled her close for another kiss, this one tinged with a desperation that hadn't been there before. I'll call you tomorrow, he promised. And Michaela, no matter what happens, please remember how I feel about you. The intensity in his voice unsettled her. You're scaring me a little. Is everything okay? It will be, he said, though his eyes held a shadow of doubt. Good night, Michaela. After he left, Michaela replayed their conversation in her mind. What had he been about to tell her? And why did it feel like a goodbye rather than a good night? The next day, Michaela was straightening books on a display table at the bookstore when her co-worker, Tasha, rushed up to her, eyes wide with excitement. Girl, you are not going to believe who was just on the news. Tasha thrust her phone into Michaela's hands. Look at this. On the screen was a paused news clip. The headline read, Westbrook Holdings announces expansion, creating 500 new jobs in Atlanta. Michaela frowned. What am I looking at? Press play, Tasha urged. Michaela tapped the screen and the video began to play. A reporter stood outside a sleek skyscraper downtown, talking about economic growth and corporate responsibility. Then the camera cut to a press conference, and Michaela's heart stopped. There, standing at a podium in an impeccable suit, was Dominic. But not the Dominic she knew, the quiet, gentle man who brought groceries and played checkers with her grandfather. This Dominic exuded power and authority, his voice confident as he addressed the crowd of reporters. Westbrook Holdings is committed to growing with Atlanta, he was saying. This expansion represents not just an investment in our company, but in the community that has supported us from the beginning. A caption appeared at the bottom of the screen. Dominic Westbrook, CEO, Westbrook Holdings. Michaela stared at the screen in disbelief. Dominic wasn't just some financial manager. He was Dominic Westbrook, the CEO of one of the largest private firms in Georgia, a billionaire. Isn't that the guy who's been coming to see you? Tasha asked, watching Michaela's face closely. The one who drove you to the hospital when your grandpa got sick? Michaela nodded numbly, unable to form words. Girl, do you know who he is? The Westbrooks are like Atlanta royalty. That man is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Tasha grabbed Michaela's arm. Why didn't you tell me you were dating Dominic Westbrook? I didn't know, Michaela whispered, her mind reeling. Everything suddenly made sense, the expensive car, the ease with which he paid hospital bills, the vague answers about his work. Her phone chimed with a text message. It was from Dominic. We need to talk. Can I come by tonight? Michaela felt a surge of anger replacing her shock. For weeks he had been in their lives, sharing meals at their table, kissing her on the balcony, telling her he was falling in love with her, all while hiding his true identity. She typed back, yes, we definitely need to talk. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Michaela moved through her tasks mechanically, her mind replaying every moment with Dominic, looking for signs she had missed. Had there been clues? Had she been completely blind? By the time she arrived home, her emotions had settled into a simmering hurt. Grandpa Joe was napping in his recliner, so she moved quietly to the kitchen to start dinner. She would hear Dominic out, but she couldn't imagine any explanation that would justify his deception. At precisely 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Michaela took a deep breath and went to answer it. Dominic stood in the hallway, looking more like the man from the news clip than the one she had come to know. He wore a tailored suit, his hair perfectly styled, his posture rigid with tension. May I come in? He asked formally. Michaela stepped aside without a word, allowing him to enter. In the living room, Grandpa Joe had woken from his nap and was watching them with curious eyes. Evening, Dominic, the old man called. Or should I say, Mr. Westbrook? Dominic winced. You saw the news? Mrs. Peterson came by earlier, nearly gave herself a heart attack telling me who you really are. Grandpa Joe didn't sound angry, merely curious. "Why didn't you say something sooner, son?" Dominic looked between them, his confident facade crumbling. "Can we sit down? I'd like to explain." They settled in the living room, Michaela deliberately choosing the chair farthest from Dominic. The distance between them felt symbolic of the chasm his deception had created. "I should have told you who I was from the beginning," Dominic started, his voice low. "But when I got that text message, when I came here that night, for the first time in years, someone was seeing me, not my name or my money or what I could do for them." He looked directly at Michaela. "The night we met, I had just left a charity gala where people had spent the entire evening trying to get me to invest in their projects or donate to their causes, not because they cared about me, but because of what I represented. Then I got your text, this simple request for groceries, and something inside me just responded. So you decided to play poor and deceive us?" Michaela's voice was sharper than she intended. Dominic shook his head. "I never claimed to be poor, I just didn't tell you who I was. I wanted to be judged on my character, not my bank account. You let me worry about money," she countered. "You watched me stress about hospital bills and medications when you could have fixed everything with the snap of your fingers." "I did fix it," he said quietly. "I paid for everything. But you let me believe it was some huge sacrifice. You let me feel indebted to you, all while hiding the fact that what you spent was probably pocket change to you." Grandpa Joe cleared his throat. "Michaela, let the man speak. I want to hear what he has to say." Dominic gave the old man a grateful look before turning back to Michaela. "I've been alone for a long time. After my parents died, I inherited Westbrook Holdings. I was 23, suddenly in charge of thousands of employees and billions in assets. People either resented me for my position or wanted something from me." He leaned forward, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Then I met you and Grandpa Joe. You invited me into your home, shared your food, your stories, your lives. Not because I was Dominic Westbrook, but because I was just Dominic. Do you have any idea how precious that was to me?" "You lied to us," Michaela said, though some of the anger had drained from her voice. "By omission, yes, and I'm sorry for that. I was going to tell you last night before I got called away." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling. "The press found out about my visits here. There were photographers outside your building this morning. That's why I had to come clean now before you found out from the tabloids." Michaela felt the blood drain from her face. "Photographers? Why would anyone care where you go or who you see?" "Because I'm news, apparently." Bitterness tinged his voice. The reclusive CEO of Westbrook Holdings, suddenly spending time in a working-class neighborhood, dating a waitress and bookstore clerk. It's the kind of story gossip columns love. "Dating?" Michaela repeated, her anger flaring again. "Is that what you told them?" "No, God, no, I haven't spoken to any reporters, but they'll speculate. They always do." Dominic stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling before her chair. "Michaela, what I told you last night was the truth. I am falling in love with you. That has nothing to do with who I am or what I own." She looked into his eyes, searching for deceit, but finding only sincerity. "You let me open up to you, tell you things. And all the while you were lying by staying silent." Dominic nodded, accepting the accusation. "I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you'd stop seeing me. I needed to be a man first, not a name." The words hit Michaela with unexpected force. Hadn't she done the same thing her whole life? Wanted to be seen as a person, not as the poor girl whose parents died, or the woman struggling to make ends meet. Grandpa Joe's voice broke the tense silence. "Seems to me you two need to talk this out alone. I'm going to see if Mrs. Peterson wants to play some gin rummy." He stood slowly, waving off Dominic's attempt to help him. "I may be old, but I can still walk across the hall by myself." After the door closed behind him, Michaela and Dominic stared at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "I understand if you can't forgive me," Dominic finally said. "But I want you to know that everything else, every moment we've shared, every word I've spoken, has been real. More real than anything in my life before I met you." Michaela felt tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore. You're this billionaire CEO and You're just the woman I'm in love with," Dominic interrupted, taking her hands in his. "The woman who works 2 jobs to support her grandfather, who reads to hospital patients on her day off, who makes me laugh and challenges me and sees me for who I really am." A tear slipped down Michaela's cheek. "How can this possibly work? We're from different worlds. Only if we let that define us." Dominic reached up to wipe away her tear. "I don't care about any of that. I care about you, about us." Michaela wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the connection they had built over these weeks. But the reality of who he was and the vast gulf between their lives seemed insurmountable. "I need time," she said finally. "This is a lot to process." Dominic nodded, pain evident in his eyes but also understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'll be waiting." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, these weeks with you and Grandpa Joe have been the happiest of my life." As he walked to the door, Michaela felt a sudden panic. Despite her hurt and confusion, the thought of him walking out of her life was unbearable. "Dominic," she called. He turned, hope flickering in his eyes. "I still don't understand why. Why me? Why us? You could have anyone, be anywhere. Why did you answer that text?" A small smile touched his lips. "Because you asked for ginger tea and peaches. Not praise, not money, not attention. Just simple things that mattered to you and your grandfather." He met her gaze. "And when you opened your door that night, you saw me before you knew my name. No one had done that in a very long time." With those words he left, closing the door softly behind him. Michaela stood motionless, his answer echoing in her mind. She was still standing there when Grandpa Joe returned 10 minutes later. "He gone?" the old man asked, settling back into his recliner. Michaela nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "You know," Grandpa Joe said thoughtfully, "when your grandmother and I first met, her daddy didn't approve, said a mechanic wasn't good enough for his daughter." He chuckled at the memory. "But your grandma, she told him, 'Daddy, I'm not marrying his job, I'm marrying the man.'" Michaela sat beside her grandfather, laying her head on his shoulder like she used to do as a child. "This is different, Grandpa. He lied to us." "Did he? Or did he just give us a chance to know him without all the trappings?" The old man patted her hand. "I've lived a long time, baby girl. Long enough to know that the heart recognizes truth even when the mind is confused." "What should I do?" she whispered. Grandpa Joe smiled. "What does your heart tell you?" Michaela closed her eyes, letting herself feel past the hurt and confusion. Despite everything, the connection she felt with Dominic remained, a steady warmth beneath the tumult of her emotions. "That I'm falling in love with him too," she admitted. "But I'm scared, Grandpa. His world is so different from ours." "Maybe it's not about whose world is whose," the old man suggested. "Maybe it's about building a new one together." As Michaela pondered his words, her phone chimed with a text message. With trembling fingers, she checked the screen, half hoping, half fearing it would be from Dominic. It wasn't. Instead, it was from Tasha, with a link to an article. "Billionaire playboy Dominic Westbrook's latest conquest. Mystery woman from the wrong side of town." Attached was a grainy photo of Dominic leaving their apartment building, his face somber. The caption read, "Westbrook leaving his new girlfriend's rundown apartment in East Atlanta. Sources close to the billionaire say it's just another of his charitable projects." Michaela stared at the phone, her heart turning to ice. This was the reality of Dominic's world, a world where her life was reduced to gossip, where she was nothing but a charitable project for a bored billionaire. She turned off her phone, her decision made. No matter what her heart said, some differences were too vast to bridge. Some worlds were never meant to collide. For 3 days, Michaela ignored Dominic's calls and text messages. Each time her phone rang, she felt a pull to answer, to hear his voice again, but the memory of that tabloid article stopped her. Charitable project. The words had cut deeper than she cared to admit. On the 4th day, she arrived home from her shift at the diner to find a large envelope leaning against her apartment door. Her name was written on it in Dominic's neat handwriting. Inside was a letter and a stack of papers. Settling on the couch, Michaela began to read. "Dear Michaela, I understand why you haven't responded to my calls. I've hurt you, and I'm deeply sorry for that. The article you may have seen is full of lies. You have never been a project to me. You are the woman who reminded me what it means to live with purpose and joy. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I hope you'll give me a chance to make things right. Enclosed are documents transferring ownership of a small trust fund I've established for Grandpa Joe's medical needs. This isn't charity. It's a gesture of love for a man who has shown me more kindness in a few weeks than I've known in years. The money is his, regardless of what happens between us. I miss your voice, your smile, the way you see the world with such clarity and strength. I miss Grandpa Joe's stories and the feeling of belonging I found at your table. If you're willing to talk, I'll be at River Park tomorrow at noon, by the old oak tree where we walked last month. If you don't come, I'll understand and I won't bother you again. With all my heart." Dominic. Michaela stared at the papers. legal documents establishing a trust in Joseph Reese's name, with enough money to cover his medical expenses for years to come. Her first instinct was to tear it all up, to reject what felt like a payoff, but she knew that would be pride talking, not sense. This was for her grandfather, not for her. "What you reading that's got you looking so serious?" Grandpa Joe asked, shuffling into the living room. Michaela handed him the letter. "It's from Dominic." The old man read it slowly, nodding as he took in the words. "That boy's got a good heart, whatever else you might say about him. He lied to us, Grandpa." "Did he now?" Grandpa Joe settled into his recliner, fixing his granddaughter with a knowing look. "Seems to me he just didn't tell us everything, like how you don't tell everyone you meet about losing your parents, or how I don't talk about the war unless somebody asks." Michaela frowned. "That's different." "Is it? We all have parts of ourselves we keep private until we're sure it's safe to share." He tapped the letter. "This here tells me he cares about us, about you, enough to try and make things right. There was an article, Grandpa. It called me his charitable project." The old man scoffed. "And you believe some gossip rag over what your own heart knows?" He shook his head. "I thought I raised you better than that." His words stung, but Michaela knew there was truth in them. She had seen the real Dominic, in the way he listened to her grandfather's stories, in how he remembered the exact brand of tea she liked, in the gentleness of his touch when he thought no one was watching. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. Grandpa Joe smiled. "Yes, you do. You're just scared to do it." That night, Michaela barely slept. Her mind kept replaying every moment with Dominic, trying to separate what was real from what might have been part of some hidden agenda. By morning, she was no closer to a decision. She went through her shift at the bookstore mechanically, shelving books and helping customers, while her thoughts remained fixed on the upcoming noon hour. Would she go to the park? What would she say if she did? At 11:30, she found herself asking her manager for an early lunch break. 20 minutes later, she was walking through River Park, her heart pounding with each step toward the old oak tree. Dominic was already there, standing with his back to her, looking out over the small lake. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, more like the Dominic she had first known than the polished CEO from the news. As if sensing her presence, he turned. The hope that flared in his eyes when he saw her made Michaela's breath catch. "You came," he said simply. "I almost didn't," she admitted, stopping a few feet away from him. "I'm glad you did." He gestured to a bench nearby. "Can we sit?" They settled on the bench, a careful distance between them. For a moment neither spoke. The sounds of the park, children playing, birds calling, the distant splash of ducks landing on the lake, filling the silence. "I saw the article," Michaela finally said, "about your charitable project." Dominic's jaw tightened. "That article was garbage. I've already had my lawyers contact the publication for a retraction." "Is that what you do? Use your money and power to make problems go away?" "No," he said firmly, "but I won't let them spread lies about you, about us." Michaela studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. "There's an us." "I hope so." Dominic's voice softened. "These past few days without you have been empty. I keep reaching for my phone to text you about the smallest things. A book I think you'd like, a funny conversation I overheard, just to ask how your day is going." "You could have told me who you were from the beginning," Michaela said, though there was less accusation in her tone now. "Why didn't you?" Dominic looked out over the lake, gathering his thoughts. "When you're worth what I'm worth, people see the money first. Always. They don't see a man who gets lonely, who has doubts, who wishes for something real." He turned back to her. "That night, when I knocked on your door with groceries, you looked at me, really looked at me, and saw just a person. Do you know how rare that is in my world? But you let it go on for weeks, Dominic. You came into our lives, became important to us, all while hiding this huge part of who you are." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "I kept telling myself I would tell you soon, that I just wanted a little more time being just Dominic with you. It was selfish, and I'm sorry." Michaela felt her resolve weakening. There was such sincerity in his eyes, such vulnerability in his admission. "The trust fund for Grandpa Joe," she said. "I can't accept that. It's not for you to accept or reject. It's for him, and it's already done." Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. "Your grandfather deserves to live without worrying about medical bills, and you deserve to focus on your own dreams instead of working yourself to exhaustion just to keep afloat." "What dreams?" Michaela laughed bitterly. "I haven't had the luxury of dreams in a long time." "Tell me one," Dominic urged. Just one thing you'd do if money and time weren't obstacles. Michaela hesitated, then decided there was no harm in sharing this one small truth. I'd finished my degree. I was studying education before my parents died. I wanted to be a teacher. Dominic smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. You'd be an amazing teacher. The way you explain books to customers at the store, how patient you are with Grandpa Joe. Kids would be lucky to have you. It doesn't matter now. That dream died a long time ago. It doesn't have to stay dead. Dominic reached for her hand, then stopped himself, respecting the distance she had established. Michaela, I can't change the past, can't undo my mistake in not telling you who I was, but I can promise you this. From now on, complete honesty. No more secrets. It's not just about the secrets, Michaela said, finally giving voice to her deepest fear. It's about who we are. You live in a world of board meetings and private jets and charity galas. I work double shifts and clip coupons and worry about the electric bill. How could that ever work? Because none of that defines who we are at our core. Dominic's gaze was intense, willing her to understand. I'm still the man who delivers groceries in the middle of the night because someone might need them. You're still the woman who works 2 jobs to care for her grandfather and still finds time to read to hospital patients on weekends. The rest is just circumstance. A tear slipped down Michaela's cheek. I want to believe that. I do. But your world scares me, Dominic. Those people, those expectations. Then we create our own world. He reached for her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. I'm not asking you to fit into my life. I'm asking for a chance to build something new with you. The warmth of his hand around hers felt right, familiar in a way that contradicted how short a time they had known each other. Michaela looked into his eyes and saw not the billionaire CEO, but simply Dominic, the man who remembered her grandfather's favorite bread, who listened to her dreams as if they mattered, who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. I need time, she said finally. Not to decide if I have feelings for you, I do, but to figure out what that means, what it could look like. Relief flooded Dominic's face. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. As they sat together on that bench, the gap between them slowly closing, Michaela felt a cautious hope blooming in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, love could bridge the divide between their worlds. 2 weeks later, Michaela stood outside the imposing glass doors of Westbrook Holdings, her stomach in knots. After much thought and many conversations with both Dominic and her grandfather, she had agreed to take a step into Dominic's world. Today he was giving her a tour of his company, followed by dinner at his home, a penthouse she had only seen in magazine features. You can do this, she whispered to herself, smoothing down the new dress she had bought for the occasion. It had cost more than she usually spent on clothes for an entire season, but she had wanted to look appropriate for this glimpse into Dominic's life. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the doors into a soaring lobby of marble and glass. A security guard directed her to a private elevator, where she gave her name and was immediately whisked to the top floor. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where a sleek, immaculately dressed woman sat behind a desk. Ms. Reese, the woman stood, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. Mr. Westbrook is expecting you. This way, please. Michaela followed her down a corridor lined with abstract art that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. She could feel eyes on her as they passed glass-walled offices and conference rooms, curious, evaluating gazes that made her skin prickle with discomfort. They reached a large corner office where Dominic sat behind a desk, on a call. When he saw Michaela, his whole demeanor changed. The serious businessman vanished, replaced by the man she had come to care for. He quickly ended his call and crossed the room to greet her. "Oh, you're here," he said, taking her hands in his smile warming her from the inside out. "I've been watching the clock for the past hour. I almost turned around twice," Michaela admitted with a nervous laugh. "I'm glad you didn't." He gestured to the office around them. "Welcome to my other life." For the next hour, Dominic showed her around the offices, introducing her to key staff members and explaining the various divisions of Westbrook Holdings. Michaela tried to absorb it all, to appear comfortable in this world of power suits and million-dollar deals. But with each introduction, each glimpse of the empire Dominic commanded, she felt increasingly out of place. It wasn't until they were in his private conference room, waiting for lunch to be delivered, that Dominic noticed her discomfort. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Michaela shook her head. "Nothing. It's all very impressive." "Michaela." He tilted her chin up gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. Remember our promise. Complete honesty. She sighed. Honestly? I feel like I'm on display. Like everyone is wondering what the big boss is doing with someone like me. Someone like you? Dominic's expression darkened. You mean someone intelligent, caring and beautiful. You know what I mean. I don't belong here, Dominic. I'm not like these people. Thank God for that, he said with unexpected fervor. Do you know how many of these people actually care about me versus what I can do for them? I can count them on one hand. He took her hands in his. You belong wherever you choose to be, Michaela, including here, with me. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young man entered, carrying a tray with their lunch. Thank you, Alex, Dominic said. That will be all for now. As the door closed behind the assistant, Michaela noticed a copy of the Atlanta Business Journal on the conference table. The cover featured a photo of Dominic shaking hands with the mayor, the headline reading, Westbrook's Vision, How One Man is Reshaping Atlanta's Future. Dominic followed her gaze and smiled wryly. Don't believe everything you read. The reality is far less dramatic. I don't know, Michaela said, her mood lightening slightly. Creating hundreds of jobs, revitalizing struggling neighborhoods, seems pretty dramatic to me. Is that what you've been doing? Reading up on me? His tone was teasing, but she could hear the genuine question beneath it. Michaela blushed. Maybe a little. I wanted to understand your world better. And what have you learned? That you're more than just a rich CEO. You've done a lot of good with your position. She hesitated, then added, and that you've never been photographed with the same woman twice at public events. The tabloids call you Atlanta's most eligible bachelor. Dominic groaned. Those ridiculous gossip columns. For the record, I've never cared much for the social circuit. Most of those dates were business associates or friends' sisters who needed an escort for charity functions. And now? Michaela asked, trying to keep her voice casual. What will they call you now? Dominic's eyes held hers steadily. That depends on you, on what you want this to be. The weight of his words hung between them. What did she want? The past 2 weeks had been a strange dance of reconnection. Dinners at her apartment with Grandpa Joe. Long phone conversations late into the night. A careful rebuilding of the trust that had been damaged by his deception. I want to be with you, she said finally. But I'm scared of what that means. Of how your world will see me, judge me. Then let me show you something. Dominic stood and offered his hand. There's one more part of the tour. Curious, Michaela followed him to the elevator. Instead of going down to the lobby as she expected, they went up one floor to what appeared to be a newly renovated space. The walls were freshly painted, and workers were installing what looked like classroom furniture. What is this? She asked, confused. Pride shone in Dominic's eyes as he led her through the space. This is the Westbrook Learning Center. It's going to provide free educational resources to employees and their families. GED preparation, college courses, vocational training. We're partnering with local schools to offer after-hours tutoring for kids whose parents work late. Michaela walked around the space, taking in the smart boards, the comfortable seating areas, the small library being stocked with books. This is amazing. When did you decide to do this? The idea had been percolating for a while, but Dominic hesitated, then continued. Honestly, our conversations about education, about your dream of teaching, they crystallized it for me. Education changed my life. It should be accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford it. Michaela felt a lump forming in her throat. This man, who commanded a corporate empire, had been listening to her late-night musings about the importance of education, about the gaps in the system she had observed during her brief time student teaching. We're still looking for someone to run the program, Dominic continued casually. Someone with a passion for education and an understanding of the challenges facing working families. Michaela's eyes widened as she realized what he was suggesting. Dominic, I'm not offering you a job because of us, he said quickly. I'm suggesting you consider applying for one because you're qualified and passionate. The hiring committee doesn't even know we're connected. He took her hands in his. You said you wanted to teach. This could be a way back to that dream. I don't have my degree, she reminded him. The position includes tuition assistance to complete any necessary education. It's open to candidates who are still working toward their credentials, if they have relevant experience. Michaela's mind raced with possibilities. To work in education again, to finish her degree, to make a difference in people's lives. It was everything she had once dreamed of. Think about it, Dominic urged. No pressure and no strings attached. If you're interested, you'd apply and interview just like any other candidate. And if I get the job, what would people say about us then? Dominic's gaze was steady. That would be up to us to address, together. But I won't hide how I feel about you, Michaela, no matter what role you take in my company or in my life. The intensity in his eyes made her heart race. This was the Dominic she had fallen for, thoughtful, sincere, seeing possibilities where she saw only obstacles. Thank you, she said softly, for listening, for remembering what matters to me. Always, he promised, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Now, are you ready for the second part of our day? I thought we could have dinner at my place. The mention of his penthouse brought back Michaela's nerves. I'm not sure I'm dressed appropriately for— You're perfect, Dominic interrupted, his eyes warm with admiration. And it's just dinner, not a state dinner. Though I should warn you, I'm cooking. Michaela laughed, the tension breaking. You cook? I have many hidden talents, he said with a grin. Some more successful than others. My pasta is edible. My soufflés are architectural disasters. As they left the building together, Dominic's hand resting lightly on the small of her back, Michaela felt a shift in her perspective. Perhaps their different worlds weren't as incompatible as she had feared. Perhaps, with patience and understanding, they could build something that honored both. Dominic's penthouse was exactly as Michaela had imagined from the magazine spreads. Sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the Atlanta skyline. But what surprised her were the small touches of warmth, shelves crowded with well-read books, a worn leather armchair that looked perfectly broken in, framed photos of what must be his parents on the mantel. It's beautiful, she said, taking it all in, but somehow not what I expected. Dominic smiled as he handed her a glass of wine. What did you expect? Gold fixtures and marble statues? Maybe, she admitted with a laugh, something less lived in. I spend a lot of time here alone, he said, his tone more serious. It needs to feel like home, not a showpiece. He gestured toward the kitchen. Make yourself comfortable while I check on dinner. While Dominic busied himself in the kitchen, Michaela wandered around the living room, drawn to the bookshelves. They held an eclectic mix, business texts and biographies alongside dog-eared paperback novels and poetry collections. She ran her fingers along the spines, feeling a connection to this man through the words that had shaped him. A small book caught her eye, The Little Prince, the same edition she had read to her hospital patients. She pulled it out, surprised to find it well worn, with notes in the margins in what she recognized as Dominic's handwriting. That was my mother's, Dominic said, coming up behind her. She used to read it to me when I was sick, said it had all the wisdom a person ever needed. Michaela turned to find him standing close, his eyes soft with memory. What is essential is invisible to the eye, she quoted. One sees clearly only with the heart, he finished, taking the book gently from her hands and placing it back on the shelf. My mother would have liked you. Tell me about her, Michaela said, sensing an opening to understand more about the man behind the CEO. As they moved to the kitchen, where Dominic continued preparing their meal, he shared stories of his childhood, of a mother who insisted on normality despite their wealth, who volunteered at soup kitchens and took her son along, who taught him that privilege came with responsibility, of a father who worked too much but always made time for Sunday baseball games, who taught his son the value of integrity in business and in life. They sound wonderful, Michaela said, helping him toss a salad. You must miss them terribly. Every day, Dominic admitted. The accident happened so suddenly. 1 minute they were here, planning their anniversary trip, and the next, he shook his head, unable to continue. Michaela knew that pain all too well. My parents died in a car accident too. Black ice on a bridge. They were coming home from dinner. Dominic's eyes met hers, a shared understanding passing between them. How old were you? 21. I was in my 3rd year of college. Grandpa Joe was all I had left and he needed me. So I came home, got whatever jobs I could find and tried to keep us afloat. You put your entire life on hold, Dominic said softly. Your dreams, your education, everything. Michaela shrugged. He raised me after my parents died. It was my turn to take care of him. Your loyalty to him, it's one of the things I admire most about you. Dominic reached out to take her hand. But it's okay to have dreams for yourself too. To want more. Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with understanding and something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits who had known loss and responsibility beyond their years. The timer on the oven broke the spell. Dinner was ready, and Dominic ushered her to a table set near the windows, where the lights of the city sparkled below them like fallen stars. Over a meal that proved Dominic's cooking skills were indeed more than adequate, they talked about everything and nothing, Favorite books, childhood memories, dreams for the future. It was easy, comfortable in a way that belied the vastly different circumstances of their lives. After dinner, they moved to the balcony with glasses of wine, the night air warm with the promise of summer. Michaela leaned against the railing, taking in the panoramic view of the city she had lived in all her life, but never seen from this vantage point. It's strange, she mused. From up here you can't tell which neighborhoods are struggling and which are thriving. It all just looks beautiful. Dominic stood beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. Beauty exists everywhere if you're willing to see it. In mansions and in modest apartments, in corporate boardrooms and in diners where waitresses remember exactly how you like your coffee. Michaela turned to find him watching her, his eyes full of an emotion that made her breath catch. Dominic, I'm falling in love with you, Michaela Reese, he said simply. Not with the idea of you, or with some project or novelty. With you, your strength, your heart, your unwavering loyalty to those you love. The words hung in the night air between them, honest and unadorned. Michaela knew she should be cautious, that they came from different worlds with different expectations, but in that moment, with the city spread out below them and Dominic's earnest gaze fixed on hers, those differences seemed inconsequential. I'm falling in love with you too, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, and it terrifies me. Why? He asked, stepping closer, his hand coming to rest lightly on her waist. Because I've never wanted something this much, someone this much. She looked up at him, vulnerability plain in her eyes. What if it doesn't work? What if your world rejects me or I can never fit into it? Then we create our own world, Dominic said, echoing his words from the park. One where you don't have to fit into anything but my arms. As if to demonstrate, he pulled her gently to him, one hand cradling her face with infinite tenderness. When his lips met hers, Michaela felt something unlock inside her. A door she had kept firmly closed now opening to possibility, to hope, to love. The kiss deepened, a promise and a plea wrapped into one. Michaela's hands found their way to Dominic's shoulders, anchoring herself as the world seemed to spin around them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she saw in his eyes the same wonder she felt. Stay with me tonight, he whispered against her lips. Just to talk, to be together. I'm not ready for this night to end. Michaela hesitated, thinking of Grandpa Joe waiting at home. As if reading her mind, Dominic added, I already spoke to Grandpa Joe earlier today. Mrs. Peterson is staying with him tonight, just in case. You thought of everything, she said, touched by his consideration. I try to. His smile was gentle, patient. But if you're not comfortable staying, I understand. I can take you home whenever you're ready. In that moment, Michaela made her decision. She was tired of living in fear, fear of loss, fear of change, fear of opening her heart. This man had shown her nothing but respect and care from the moment he had appeared at her door with groceries in the middle of the night. I'll stay, she said softly, but just to talk, to be together. Relief and joy transformed Dominic's face. That's all I want. Time with you, getting to know you better, sharing more of myself with you. As they moved back inside, hand in hand, Michaela felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way that had nothing to do with the luxury surrounding them and everything to do with the man beside her. Hours later, they lay on the couch. Michaela nestled against Dominic's chest as they talked in the soft glow of the city lights, filtering through the windows. She had borrowed one of his t-shirts to sleep in, the soft cotton engulfing her small frame. They had talked about everything, their hopes for the future, their fears, their dreams. I want you to consider something, Dominic said, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. The position at the Learning Center. Will you apply for it? Michaela traced patterns on his arm, considering, I'm not sure it's a good idea. People would talk. People always talk. The question is, would the job make you happy? Would it move you closer to your dreams? She thought about it, about the thrill she had felt seeing those classrooms, imagining the impact such a center could have. Yes, she admitted, it would. Then apply. If you get it, we'll figure out the rest together. Dominic pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I don't want my position to ever hold you back from what you want. Michaela lifted her head to look at him. And what about what you want? How would it look for the CEO to be dating an employee? I don't care how it looks, Dominic said firmly. I care about you, about us. The rest is just noise. She smiled, touched by his certainty. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it can be. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Not easy necessarily, but simple in what matters. We care about each other, we're honest with each other, we support each other's dreams. As Michaela settled back against his chest, sleep beginning to claim her. She allowed herself to believe that perhaps he was right. Perhaps love could be that simple, if both people were brave enough to choose it every day. The next morning, Michaela woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet conversation. Disoriented at first, she sat up on the couch, wrapped in the blanket Dominic had tucked around her before moving to his own room, respecting her boundaries. Following the voices, she found Dominic in the kitchen, on the phone, his back to her as he looked out over the morning skyline. He was dressed in casual weekend clothes, jeans and a soft Henley, so different from the suits she had seen him in at the office. "I understand it's an important meeting," he was saying, his tone firm but patient, "but I've made other commitments for this weekend that I'm not willing to break. The deal will have to wait until Monday." He turned and saw her, his face lighting up in a way that made her heart skip. "I need to go, Marcus. We'll discuss this later." He ended the call and crossed to her, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "Good morning. Coffee? Please," she said, settling onto a stool at the kitchen island. "Important business call?" Dominic poured her a cup, adding the exact amount of cream she preferred. "Nothing that can't wait. My assistant is still adjusting to the idea that I might occasionally prioritize my personal life." "And what commitments do you have this weekend that are so important?" she asked, curious. Dominic smiled, sliding the coffee toward her. "Well, I promised a certain Joseph Reese that I'd help him clear out his storage unit. Apparently there are boxes that need lifting, and his granddaughter, while capable in every other way, lacks the necessary height and muscle mass." Michaela laughed, surprised. "Grandpa Joe asked you to help with his storage unit? When did this happen?" "When I called him last night to make sure he was okay with Mrs. Peterson staying over. He mentioned he's been meaning to sort through those boxes for years and thought this weekend might be good." Dominic shrugged. "I said I'd be happy to help." The image of Dominic Westbrook, billionaire CEO, spending his Saturday lifting dusty boxes in a storage facility was so incongruous that Michaela couldn't help but smile. "You don't have to do that, you know. I'm sure you have more important things to do with your weekend. More important than spending time with you and Grandpa Joe." "I doubt it." He leaned across the island, his expression turning serious. "This is what I want, Michaela. Not galas or board meetings or business deals, just normal life with people who matter to me." The simple sincerity in his voice melted the last of her reservations. This was the real Dominic, not the polished executive from yesterday's tour, but the man who had shown up at her door with groceries, who remembered how her grandfather liked his tea, who was willing to spend his Saturday digging through old boxes just to be part of their lives. "In that case," she said, reaching for his hand, "we should get going. Grandpa Joe gets impatient when he's on a mission." Dominic's smile was like sunrise. "I'll make breakfast first. Can't lift boxes on an empty stomach." As he moved around the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of eggs and toast, Michaela watched him with growing certainty. This man, this complex, caring, surprising man, was becoming essential to her happiness. The differences in their worlds, while real, seemed less important with each passing day. Later, as they drove toward her apartment in Dominic's sleek but understated car, Michaela's phone chimed with a text from Tasha. "Girl, you need to see this. They're talking about you." Attached was a link to another tabloid article. The headline read, "Westbrook's mystery woman, gold digger, or true love?" Michaela's stomach clenched as she clicked the link. The article was filled with speculation about her relationship with Dominic, complete with quotes from sources close to the couple, claiming she was after his money. There was a grainy photo of them leaving his office building together the day before, Dominic's hand protectively at the small of her back. "What's wrong?" Dominic asked, noticing her expression. Wordlessly, she handed him her phone at the next stoplight. His jaw tightened as he scanned the article, then handed the phone back to her. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice tight with anger. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen once people knew about us." "It's okay," Michaela said, though her voice trembled slightly. "I knew what I was getting into." "No, it's not okay." Dominic pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. "You don't deserve this kind of scrutiny, these lies, and I won't let them hurt you." "What can you even do about it?" Michaela asked. "You can't control what people write." "No, but I can control how we respond." His eyes held a determined glint. "We have two options. We can hide, try to keep our relationship private, which honestly never works. Or we can face it head on, show the world that what we have is real." "How would we do that?" Dominic took her hand. "Come with me to the Children's Hospital benefit next weekend. It's a major event. Press, city leaders, the whole works. We'll attend together publicly, no hiding, no shame." Michaela's eyes widened. You want me to go to a fancy charity gala? Dominic, I don't belong in that world. I wouldn't know how to act, what to wear. You belong wherever I am, he interrupted gently. And as for the rest, those are just details. We can figure them out together. He squeezed her hand. But only if you want to. I won't push you into anything that makes you uncomfortable. Michaela looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, strong and steady. Taking this step meant committing to a public relationship with Dominic, opening herself up to even more scrutiny. But it also meant standing proudly by his side, refusing to let others define what they could be to each other. Okay, she said finally, looking up to meet his surprised gaze. Let's do it. Let's show them what real looks like. The smile that broke across Dominic's face was like sunshine after rain. Are you sure? No, she admitted with a small laugh. But I'm sure about you, about us. The rest we'll figure out, like you said. Dominic leaned across the console to kiss her, a brief but passionate meeting of lips that sealed their decision. You are the bravest woman I know, Michaela Reese, and I am the luckiest man. As they continued toward her apartment, Michaela felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. She was stepping into a world she had never imagined for herself, with a man who seemed determined to show her she belonged there. It was terrifying, yes, but also, in its own way, beautiful. The week leading up to the gala passed in a blur of activity. Dominic insisted on sending his personal shopper to help Michaela find a dress, despite her protests that she could shop for herself. Think of it this way, he said when she objected. Sophia knows exactly what these events are like. She can help you find something that makes you feel confident and comfortable, not just beautiful. Reluctantly, Michaela agreed and was surprised to find herself genuinely liking Sophia, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who treated the assignment with the seriousness of a military operation. Forget what you think you should wear, Sophia told her as they browsed through a boutique that Michaela would never have entered on her own. We're looking for something that makes you feel like yourself, just elevated. They finally settled on a deep blue gown with simple lines that hugged Michaela's curves without being overly revealing. The color made her skin glow and her eyes shine, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who could stand confidently in any room, even one filled with Atlanta's elite. Meanwhile, Dominic had kept his promise to help Grandpa Joe with the storage unit, spending an entire Saturday sorting through boxes and listening to the old man's stories about each item they uncovered. By the end of the day, they had developed a camaraderie that warmed Michaela's heart to witness. That young man's got a good soul, Grandpa Joe told her that night after Dominic had left. Don't you let him get away, because you're scared of his big fancy world. I'm trying not to be scared, Michaela admitted. But it's hard, Grandpa. These people, they're not like us. People are people, baby girl. Some good, some bad, most somewhere in between. Money just gives them different ways to show which one they are. The old man patted her hand. And that Dominic, he shows who he is every time he looks at you. The night of the gala arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement. Dominic had arranged for a car to pick Michaela up, giving her time to get ready without him hovering. Grandpa Joe whistled when she emerged from her bedroom in the blue gown, her hair swept up in an elegant style that Tasha, who worked at a salon part-time, had helped her create. You look like your mama, he said, his eyes misting. She'd be so proud of you, baby girl. Michaela hugged him carefully, mindful of her makeup. I wish she could be here. She is, in her way. Grandpa Joe straightened the simple silver necklace at her throat, a gift from her parents on her 16th birthday. You carry her with you everywhere you go. When the doorbell rang, Michaela's heart leapt. Dominic stood in the hallway, breathtakingly handsome in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but it was his expression when he saw her that took her breath away, a look of such wonder and admiration that she felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. You are stunning, he said simply, offering her a small velvet box. I brought you something. Inside was a pair of sapphire earrings that caught the light like captured stars. Dominic, these are too much. They were my mother's, he said quietly. She would have wanted you to have them tonight, but only if you want to wear them. The personal nature of the gift touched Michaela deeply. These weren't just expensive jewels. They were a piece of his history, his family. I'd be honored, she said, replacing her simple studs with the sapphires. Grandpa Joe beamed at them both. You two look like something out of a movie. Now go on, show those fancy folks what real class looks like. As they rode to the gala in Dominic's car, Michaela fought against rising nerves. What if I use the wrong fork or say something stupid? Dominic took her hand, his thumb stroking her palm soothingly. Just be yourself. That's who I'm proud to be with tonight. Even if being myself means getting flustered and knocking over a champagne tower, she asked, only half joking. He laughed. Even then, especially then, the Children's Hospital benefit was being held at the city's most prestigious hotel, its ballroom transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights and flowers. As their car pulled up to the entrance, Michaela could see photographers lined up along the red carpet, flashbulbs already popping as guests arrived. "Ready?" Dominic asked, squeezing her hand. Michaela took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." When they stepped out of the car, the reaction was immediate. Photographers called Dominic's name, cameras swinging toward them. Dominic's arm came around her waist, supportive and protective as they walked the gauntlet of flashing lights. "Mr. Westbrook, who's your date?" "Dominic, over here." "Is this the mystery woman from the tabloids?" Dominic ignored the questions, guiding Michaela steadily toward the entrance. But just before they reached the doors, he paused, turning to face the press directly. "This is Michaela Reese," he said clearly, his voice carrying over the clamor. "And she's not a mystery. She's the woman I'm in love with." A stunned silence fell over the photographers, followed by a renewed frenzy of flashing cameras. But Michaela barely noticed, her world narrowing to Dominic's face, to the words he had just spoken so publicly. "In love with," she whispered as he led her inside, away from the chaos. Dominic's eyes met hers, serious and certain. "Yes, I love you, Michaela. I wanted them to hear it first from me, directly. No speculation, no rumors, just the truth." Before she could respond, they were swept into the gala, greeted by the event organizers, and directed toward their table near the front of the room. Michaela moved through the introductions in a daze, Dominic's declaration echoing in her mind. He loved her, not just falling in love, but there, fully, completely, and he had announced it to the world without hesitation. Throughout the evening, Michaela was aware of curious gazes, of whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. But Dominic never left her side, introducing her to everyone as Michaela Reese, the woman who reminded me what matters in life. To her surprise, many of the guests were warm and welcoming, especially once they realized she wasn't intimidated by their wealth or status. The hospital's chief of pediatrics engaged her in a long conversation about early childhood education when she mentioned her background in teaching. The mayor's wife asked for her recipe for sweet potato pie, after Dominic mentioned that Michaela's was the best he'd ever tasted. By the time they took to the dance floor, Michaela felt some of her tension easing. Dominic held her close as they swayed to the music, his cheek resting against her hair. "You're amazing," he murmured. "Everyone is enchanted by you." "I doubt that," she said with a small laugh, "but it hasn't been as terrifying as I expected. See, my world isn't so different from yours, just more expensive clothes and worse food." Michaela smiled against his shoulder. "The food is pretty bad. Grandpa Joe's meatloaf is 10 times better than whatever that was supposed to be. Next time we'll bring him as our personal chef." Dominic pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "You haven't said anything about what I told the reporters." Michaela's heart raced. "You mean when you said you love me?" "Yes." His gaze was steady, vulnerable. "I know it's soon. I know our lives are complicated, but I do love you, Michaela. Completely." In that moment, surrounded by the glitter and glamour of a world she had never imagined entering, Michaela found absolute clarity. The man holding her wasn't the billionaire CEO or the society figure. He was just Dominic, the man who brought groceries in the middle of the night, who played checkers with her grandfather, who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his universe. "I love you too," she said simply. "I think I have since that first night in some way I couldn't understand yet." The joy that blazed in his eyes at her words was worth every moment of discomfort, every curious stare, every tabloid headline. Dominic lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle but filled with promise, a promise of a future they would build together, bridging their two worlds into something new and beautiful. As they continued to dance, oblivious to the eyes watching them, to the photographers capturing the moment from the doorway, Michaela felt a sense of homecoming unlike anything she had experienced before. Home wasn't a place, she realized. It was a person. And she had found hers in the most unexpected way, through a wrong number text asking for groceries. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, noticing her smile. "That I'm glad I sent that text to the wrong number," she said. "Best mistake I ever made." Dominic's answering smile was radiant. "For once we agree completely." As the night continued around them, they remained in their own world. Two people who had found each other against all odds, proving that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the simplest of needs, everything on a grocery list and someone to carry it home. 3 months after the Children's Hospital Gala, Michaela stood in front of a classroom at the newly opened Westbrook Learning Center, her heart full as she watched a group of adults working through math problems she had just explained. These were employees of Westbrook Holdings, maintenance staff, cafeteria workers, security personnel, all taking advantage of the free education program to earn their GEDs or prepare for college courses. She had gotten the job on her own merits, impressing the hiring committee with her passion and ideas despite her unfinished degree. Dominic had kept his word, recusing himself entirely from the hiring process. Now, 2 months into the role, Michaela felt like she had found her purpose again, teaching, encouraging, watching people grow in confidence and skills. Ms. Reese, one of her students, a middle-aged janitor named Harold, raised his hand. "I think I'm stuck on this one." Michaela moved to his desk, leaning down to look at his work. "You're almost there, Harold. Look at how you set up the equation." As she guided him through the problem, she felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. This was what she had dreamed of doing since she was a little girl, making a difference in people's lives through education. The fact that she was doing it in a program housed in Dominic's company, while enrolled in online courses to finish her own degree, still felt surreal sometimes. After class, Michaela gathered her materials, her mind already turning to the evening ahead. Dominic was coming for dinner at her apartment, a regular occurrence now, though they carefully balanced time between his penthouse and her more modest home. He had insisted from the beginning that their relationship wouldn't be one-sided, with her always entering his world. He valued the simple comfort of her small apartment, the home-cooked meals shared with Grandpa Joe, the normalcy that had been missing from his life for so long. As she walked through the main lobby, heading for the employee entrance where she usually caught the bus, she heard her name called. Turning, she saw Marcus, Dominic's assistant, hurrying toward her. "Ms. Reese," he said, slightly out of breath. "Mr. Westbrook asked me to tell you he's running late for dinner tonight. An unexpected situation came up with the Tokyo office. He said to tell you he'll be there by 8, and he's very sorry." Michaela smiled. She had learned that running a global corporation meant occasional disruptions to plans. "Thank you, Marcus. Is everything okay with the Tokyo deal?" Marcus looked surprised, then pleased that she knew about the business. "It's a minor hiccup. Mr. Westbrook will smooth it out." He hesitated, then added, "He also asked me to offer you a ride home. His driver is waiting outside." "That's not necessary. I can take the bus like usual." "He was quite insistent," Marcus said, a small smile playing at his lips. "Between you and me, Ms. Reese, he worries about you taking public transportation after dark." Michaela shook her head, both exasperated and touched by Dominic's protectiveness. "The bus is perfectly safe, but I appreciate the offer. Please tell the driver I said thank you, but not today." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. In the months since Michaela had entered Dominic's life, the assistant had watched his boss transform from a workaholic who rarely smiled to a man who found joy in simple pleasures, who left the office at reasonable hours, who spoke about the future with hope rather than calculated precision. "May I speak frankly, Ms. Reese?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Of course, and please, call me Michaela. I've worked for Mr. Westbrook for 7 years. In that time, I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past few months." Marcus's formal demeanor softened slightly. "Whatever you're doing, please don't stop." Michaela felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I'm not doing anything special, Marcus. Just loving him for who he is, not what he owns." "That," Marcus said with unexpected emotion, "is the most special thing anyone has ever done for him." With a quick nod, the assistant returned to his professional demeanor and hurried back toward the executive elevators, leaving Michaela touched by the brief glimpse into how others saw her relationship with Dominic. At home, Michaela found Grandpa Joe sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Peterson, playing cards and laughing like teenagers. "Look who's home," Grandpa Joe called. "My brilliant granddaughter, shaping minds and changing lives." Michaela kissed his cheek. "I'm just teaching basic math, Grandpa. Not exactly changing the world. Every teacher changes the world," Mrs. Peterson said firmly, "one student at a time." "Dominic's running late tonight," Michaela told them as she set her bag down. "Some issue with the Tokyo office. He'll be here around 8. Grandpa Joe and Mrs. Peterson exchanged a look that Michaela couldn't quite interpret. "What?" she asked, suspicious. "What was that look about?" "Nothing, baby girl," Grandpa Joe said innocently. "We're just happy for you two, that's all." Michaela narrowed her eyes. Her grandfather was many things, but a good liar wasn't one of them. Grandpa, oh, would you look at the time? Mrs. Peterson stood abruptly. I should get back to my apartment. Left a casserole in the oven. As the older woman hurried out with a conspiratorial wink to Grandpa Joe, Michaela put her hands on her hips. Okay, what's going on? You two are acting weird. Grandpa Joe shrugged, gathering up the playing cards. Can't an old man just be happy that his granddaughter found a good man, one who treats her like the queen she is? Despite her suspicions, Michaela couldn't help but smile. Her grandfather had become Dominic's biggest fan, the two of them forming a bond that went beyond their shared affection for her. They watched baseball games together, argued good-naturedly about politics, and shared stories late into the evening when Dominic came for dinner. He is a good man, she agreed softly. Better than I ever imagined I'd find. Grandpa Joe's eyes twinkled. And handsome too, don't forget handsome. Those Westbrook genes ought to make some beautiful great-grandchildren someday. Grandpa! Michaela felt her cheeks flush. We've only been together a few months. When you know, the old man said with the certainty of someone who had experienced true love himself. Your grandmother agreed to marry me after 6 weeks. Said there wasn't any point waiting when her heart was already made up. Michaela shook her head, but couldn't deny the flutter in her chest at the thought. She and Dominic hadn't discussed marriage yet, but there was an unspoken understanding between them, a certainty that what they had found together was rare and precious and meant to last. I'm going to start dinner, she said, changing the subject. Will you help me chop vegetables? As they worked together in the small kitchen, Grandpa Joe hummed an old love song, occasionally glancing at his granddaughter with a secretive smile that she pretended not to notice. At precisely 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Michaela wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, her heart still doing that little skip it always did when she knew Dominic was on the other side. He stood in the hallway looking slightly rumpled after his long day, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up, but his eyes lit up when he saw her, the stress of work visibly falling away. Hi, he said simply, pulling her into a kiss that made her forget everything else. Hi yourself, she murmured when they broke apart. Rough day with Tokyo? Dominic groaned. You have no idea, but it's handled now. He pulled a small paper bag from behind his back. I brought dessert. That key lime pie from the bakery you like. You remembered, she said, touched by the thoughtfulness. I remember everything about you, he replied, his tone making it clear this was not an exaggeration, but a simple truth. In the kitchen, Grandpa Joe greeted Dominic with a hearty handshake that turned into a hug. There he is, the man of the hour. Michaela raised an eyebrow at her grandfather's unusual enthusiasm. Dinner's almost ready. Dominic, would you mind setting the table? As they moved around the small kitchen together, the domestic rhythm they had established over months feeling natural and right, Michaela found herself watching Dominic. He moved with ease in her modest apartment, seeming more at home here than in his luxurious penthouse. He laughed at Grandpa Joe's jokes, asked about Mrs. Peterson's arthritis, helped serve the simple meal of roast chicken and vegetables as if it were a feast at a fine restaurant. This was the real miracle, she thought, not that she had found a place in his world of wealth and power, but that he had found a place in hers, a home in the ordinary warmth of family dinner and everyday love. Over dessert, Dominic seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous. He kept glancing at Grandpa Joe, who would nod encouragingly each time. Okay, what is going on with you two? Michaela finally asked, setting down her fork. You've been acting strange all evening. Dominic cleared his throat. Actually, there is something I wanted to talk to you about. Something important. Her heart began to race. Is everything okay? Everything is perfect, he assured her quickly. It's just, I've been thinking a lot about the future. Our future. Michaela felt Grandpa Joe squeeze her hand before he stood up. I think I'll go watch my programs in the bedroom. Give you two some privacy. As the old man left the room with a wink that was anything but subtle, Dominic took a deep breath and reached for Michaela's hand across the table. These past few months have been the happiest of my life, he began, his voice steady, despite the nervousness in his eyes. Before I met you, I had success, wealth, power, all the things people think they want. But I was lonely in a way I couldn't even admit to myself. Michaela squeezed his hand encouragingly, her own emotions rising to the surface. Then you sent that text, Dominic continued, a smile touching his lips at the memory, a simple grocery list that changed everything. When I showed up at your door that night, I had no idea I was walking toward the rest of my life. He stood, still holding her hand, and guided her to the small living room, where they could sit side by side on the couch. Outside, the lights of the city twinkled, but they were nothing compared to the light in Dominic's eyes as he looked at her. "You saw me, really saw me, before you knew anything about my world. You let me into your life, shared your grandfather with me, showed me what it means to live with purpose and love." He took both her hands in his. "I don't want to imagine a future without you in it, Michaela." Her breath caught as Dominic slid from the couch to one knee before her, reaching into his pocket to produce a small velvet box. "I know it's only been a few months," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "but when you know, you know. And I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not the massive diamond she might have expected from a billionaire, but a delicate, vintage-style design with a modest center stone, surrounded by tiny sapphires that matched the earrings she had worn to the gala. "Michaela Reese," Dominic said, his eyes never leaving hers, "will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop as the question hung in the air between them. Michaela looked at the man kneeling before her. Not Dominic Westbrook, CEO of a corporate empire, but simply Dominic, the man who had brought groceries in the middle of the night, who played checkers with her grandfather, who had opened his heart to her in ways that had nothing to do with wealth or status. "Yes," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Yes, I'll marry you." Joy transformed Dominic's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly trembling hands. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, which she realized it probably had been. "It was my grandmother's," he explained, confirming her thoughts. "My mother wore it until the day she died. I had it sized for you and added the sapphires to match the earrings. I hope that's okay." "It's perfect," Michaela said, overwhelmed by the meaning behind the gift. Not just a ring, but a connection to the family he had lost, a symbol that she was now part of that cherished history. Dominic rose to sit beside her again, cupping her face in his hands. "I want you to know that I don't expect anything to change. We'll live wherever you're comfortable. Split time between places if you want. Your work at the Learning Center is important. I would never ask you to give that up." "I know," she said, touching his cheek gently. "That's one of the reasons I love you. You never try to change me or my life. You just want to be part of it." He smiled, leaning his forehead against hers. "Exactly. I don't need a society wife or a corporate partner. I just need you, exactly as you are." A sound from the hallway made them both look up. Grandpa Joe stood in the doorway, his eyes misty with emotion. "Did she say yes?" he asked, though the answer was clear from their expressions. Michaela laughed, holding up her hand to show the ring. "I said yes, Grandpa." The old man's face split into a wide grin. "Well, it's about time. I was starting to think he'd never work up the nerve to ask." "You knew?" Michaela asked, though she wasn't really surprised. "Course I knew. Boy came and asked for my blessing 2 weeks ago. Did it proper, too. Got down on one knee just like he did with you." Grandpa Joe crossed the room to embrace them both. "Welcome to the family, son." Officially. Dominic hugged the old man tightly. "Thank you, Grandpa Joe, for raising such an amazing woman, and for making room in your life for me. You made your own room," the old man said gruffly, emotion making his voice rough, "by showing up when it mattered." As the three of them celebrated together, Michaela felt a sense of completion, of puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Her world and Dominic's had seemed so far apart when they first met, but love had bridged that distance, creating something new and beautiful in the space between. 6 months later, Michaela stood in a small dressing room at the back of the church where she had grown up, her wedding dress, simple, elegant, perfect, flowing around her as Mrs. Peterson made final adjustments to her veil. "You look like an angel," the older woman said, stepping back to admire her work. "Your mama would be so proud." Michaela touched the locket at her throat, which held tiny photos of her parents. "I wish they could be here." "They are, honey," Mrs. Peterson assured her. "In all the ways that matter." A knock at the door heralded Tasha's arrival. Her friend, serving as maid of honor, peeked in with an excited grin. "Girl, you would not believe the people out there. Half of Atlanta's elite, all those fancy business types from Dominic's world." She came fully into the room, her burgundy bridesmaid dress swishing around her knees. "But you know what's weird? They're all mixed in with people from the neighborhood, your hospital volunteer friends, everyone from our old high school, and they're all getting along." Michaela smiled, not surprised. She and Dominic had worked hard to plan a wedding that honored both their worlds, elegant but not ostentatious, meaningful rather than showy. They had chosen her childhood church for the ceremony and a beautiful garden at the children's hospital for the reception, bringing together the sacred space of her past and the place that represented their shared commitment to helping others. "How's Grandpa Joe doing?" Michaela asked, thinking of her grandfather in his new suit, waiting to walk her down the aisle. "He's holding court out there like he owns the place." Tasha laughed. "I swear, that man has more stories than a library. Even the governor is eating them up." Another knock, and the wedding coordinator peeked in. "5 minutes, everyone. We're almost ready to begin." As Mrs. Peterson and Tasha hurried out to take their places, Michaela took a moment alone, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. The woman who gazed back at her looked serene, confident, a far cry from the exhausted, worried young woman who had once accidentally sent a grocery list to a wrong number. That simple mistake had changed everything, opening a door to a love she never could have imagined. It hadn't been easy bridging their different worlds. There had been challenges, raised eyebrows from some of Dominic's business associates, gossip in tabloids, the occasional awkward moment at society functions. But they had faced it all together, refusing to let others define what they could be to each other. A final knock, and Grandpa Joe appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his new suit, tears already gathering in his eyes. "Look at you," he whispered. "My beautiful girl, all grown up and getting married." Michaela went to him, careful of her dress, and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Grandpa, for everything, for raising me, for believing in me, for welcoming Dominic into our lives. You did the hard part, baby girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You opened your heart when it would have been easier to keep it closed. You took a chance on love." He offered his arm, his back straighter than it had been in years, pride giving him strength. "Now, let's go get you married to that fine young man who's waiting for you." The music swelled as they took their positions at the back of the church. The doors opened, revealing pews filled with faces from every chapter of Michaela's life. Neighbors, co-workers, students from the Learning Center, Dominic's business associates who had become friends. And at the end of the aisle, waiting with barely contained joy, stood Dominic. His eyes never left her as she walked toward him on her grandfather's arm, his expression a mix of awe and adoration that made her heart soar. This was real, she thought. This love that had begun with a simple grocery list and grown into something profound and lasting. When Grandpa Joe placed her hand in Dominic's at the altar, whispering, "Take care of my girl," Michaela saw the emotion in her soon-to-be husband's eyes. "With everything I am," Dominic promised, his voice steady and sure. The ceremony passed in a blur of meaningful words and sacred promises. Before she knew it, they were pronounced husband and wife, sealing their vows with a kiss that felt like both an ending and a beginning, the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, even more beautiful one. At the reception, after the toasts and the first dance, Michaela found a quiet moment with Dominic in the garden, the stars just beginning to appear in the early evening sky. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist, his eyes reflecting the twinkling light strung through the trees around them. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace, "though it still feels a little like a dream sometimes. If it is, I don't ever want to wake up." Dominic pressed a kiss to her temple. "You know, I've been thinking about that grocery list, the one you sent by mistake." "What about it?" she asked, smiling at the memory that had become part of their love story. "I realized something. It wasn't really a mistake at all." His voice was thoughtful, almost reverent. "It was the universe making sure I got everything on my list, everything I needed but didn't know how to ask for." "And what was on your list?" Michaela asked, turning in his arms to face him. Dominic smiled, his eyes full of love. "A family, a purpose beyond work, someone who sees me for who I really am." He touched her cheek gently. "Someone to come home to at the end of each day who loves me not for what I have but for who I am. And did you get everything on your list?" she teased softly, already knowing the answer. "That, and so much more," he whispered, drawing her closer. "You are everything I never knew to ask for, Michaela Westbrook, and I plan to spend the rest of my life being grateful for that wrong number." Their kiss was interrupted by Grandpa Joe's voice calling from the reception tent. "There they are. Come on, you two lovebirds. Time to cut the cake." Laughing, they walked hand in hand back to their guests, back to the celebration of their union. Michaela glanced around at the faces of those who had come to witness their marriage, people from every part of their lives, now mingling and connecting in ways that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. "Look at that," she said to Dominic, nodding toward a table where one of her diner regulars was deep in conversation with a board member from Westbrook Holdings. "Our worlds really can come together." "They always could," Dominic replied, squeezing her hand. "They just needed us to show them how." 5 years later, Michaela sat on a bench in River Park, watching as Dominic chased their 3-year-old daughter Ellie around the playground. Their little girl's laughter rang out across the sunny afternoon, her dark curls bouncing as she ran on sturdy legs, her father pretending he couldn't quite catch her. "Got you!" Dominic finally scooped her up, spinning her around as she squealed with delight. "What do I win for catching the fastest girl in Atlanta?" "A kiss!" Ellie declared, planting a wet smooch on her father's cheek. "And ice cream." "Ice cream, huh?" Dominic looked over at Michaela with a grin. "What does Mommy say?" Michaela patted her rounded belly, where their second child, a boy according to the ultrasound, was due in just 2 months. "Mommy says ice cream sounds perfect for all of us." As Dominic carried Ellie over to the bench, settling beside his wife with their daughter on his lap, Michaela felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often washed over her when she least expected it. Their life together wasn't perfect. They had disagreements, challenges, the occasional clash of their different backgrounds, but it was rich and full in all the ways that mattered. They had found a balance, splitting their time between a modest house near Grandpa Joe, who at 82 was still going strong, though now with live-in help that Dominic had insisted on providing, and the penthouse downtown, which they used mainly when Dominic needed to be close to the office for important projects. Michaela had completed her education degree and now ran the Westbrook Learning Center full-time, expanding it to serve not just employees, but the broader community. Dominic had restructured his company to allow him more family time, delegating responsibilities and building a leadership team that shared his values. "Penny for your thoughts," Dominic said, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she replied, taking his free hand. "All because of a grocery list sent to the wrong number. Best mistake you ever made," he said, echoing the words she had spoken at their first gala together. Ellie looked up, curious. "What mistake, Daddy?" Michaela smiled at her daughter. "Once upon a time, Mommy needed some groceries. She tried to send a list to Aunt Tanya, but she accidentally sent it to Daddy instead. Even though he was a stranger," Ellie's eyes widened at this revelation. "Even though he was a complete stranger," Dominic confirmed. "But instead of just ignoring the message, I decided to buy everything on the list and deliver it. In the middle of the night," Michaela added, still amazed at the memory. "He knocked on our door at 2 in the morning with eggs, tea, peaches, and bread." Ellie giggled. "That's silly, Daddy." "Maybe," he agreed, tickling her sides. "But it was the smartest silly thing I ever did, because it led me to your mommy, and then to you, and soon to your baby brother," Michaela added, rubbing her belly as the baby kicked, as if to announce his presence in the conversation. "I'm glad you made a mistake, Mommy," Ellie declared, with the simple wisdom of childhood. "I like our family." "So do I, sweetheart," Michaela said, her heart full. "More than anything in the world." As they walked toward the ice cream stand, Ellie skipping ahead, Dominic's arm around Michaela's waist, she thought about all the little choices and chances that had brought them to this moment. A grocery list, a wrong number, a decision to answer a stranger's text. Small things that had changed everything. "You know what I was thinking?" Dominic said, his voice thoughtful. "Maybe we should frame that grocery list, the original one you sent me. I still have the text saved." Michaela laughed. "You saved a grocery list text for 5 years." "Of course I did." His expression was serious despite his smile. "It's the most important text message I've ever received. It led me to everything that matters." At the ice cream stand, as they helped Ellie choose between chocolate and strawberry, an elderly couple at a nearby table smiled at them. "Beautiful family," the woman commented. "You two look so happy together." "We are," Dominic replied simply, his arms still around Michaela. "We're very blessed." Later that evening, after putting Ellie to bed with a story and a song, Michaela found Dominic in their home office, looking at something on his phone with a smile. "What are you doing?" she asked, coming to stand behind him, her arms slipping around his shoulders. He showed her the screen, a screenshot of that first text message, preserved all these years. "Need eggs, ginger tea, the one with lemon, canned peaches and honey wheat bread from Jackson's. We'll pay you back." "Thanks. Hard to believe this changed our lives," Michaela said, reading the simple words with a sense of wonder. "Not that hard," Dominic replied, pulling her around to sit on his lap, careful of her pregnant belly. "Everything I needed was right there on that list." Michaela raised an eyebrow. "Eggs and bread were everything you needed?" "The list brought me to your door," Dominic explained, his hand resting on their unborn son. "And behind that door was everything I'd been searching for my whole life. A family, a home, a love that saw past all the trappings to the real me. He kissed her softly, the same tenderness in his touch as the first time, yet deepened by years of shared life and love. "You're still a romantic," Michaela teased when they parted, though her eyes shone with the same love that filled his. "Only with you," he promised. "Always with you." As they turned out the lights and headed to bed, Michaela thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a mistaken text to a family built on understanding, respect, and deep, abiding love. It hadn't always been easy, bridging their different worlds, but together they had created something beautiful and real. And it had all started with everything on the list: eggs, tea, peaches, and bread. Simple things that had led to the greatest gift of all, a love that saw past circumstances to the heart of what truly mattered. In their bedroom, as Dominic's hand rested protectively over their unborn son, Michaela whispered into the darkness, "I'm glad I sent that text to the wrong number." "I'm glad I answered," Dominic whispered back. "Best decision I ever made." As sleep claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms, Michaela knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the simplest of mistakes, and that true love isn't about finding someone from the same world, but about building a new world together. One day, one choice, one grocery list at a time. The end.